Hello, I am Ron Edwards with ChineseEconomicHistory.com, and we're here today at Kyoto's World Economic History Congress. This is the first time that the World Economic History Congress is being held in the Far East, and we're extremely pleased to have our inaugural interview with Professor Yoshinobu Shiba. Yoshinobu Shiba is one of, if arguably not the best, well-known Song China economic historian. His contributions on this are very deep and immense, and his influence has been quite great. He is currently the executive librarian of Toyo Bunko, which I had the pleasure of visiting in November of 2013. He's also a member of the Japanese Academy, and he is Professor Emeritus of Osaka University. So first of all, I would just simply like to ask Professor Shiba, how did you become interested in Song China economic history?
It was in my time of the high school. My teacher was a very famous specialist medieval economic history with, and he gave me a very interesting lecture on the daily life of the changes in daily life of the medieval people. In
Chinese medieval day life?
Huh?
I'm sorry, the Chinese medieval day life?
No, German.
German
history.
I see.
So, and after I entered in the Tokyo University, I tried to study the same topics in China, medieval China's change.
I see. So many economists in the West do not know that the discovery of the difference of Song China compared to its previous imperial periods was quite different, and that was a Japanese discovery. Could you please briefly explain the Japanese discovery of the Tang-Song transition, which Western economists would call Song China economic growth, and its impact?
It was in early 20th century that two professors of the Kyoto University, one, Naito Torajiro, and
also known as Naito Konan.
Naito Konan, and later, and Miyazaki Ichisada proposed an idea of the big social and economic change took place in the Song during the later half of the Tang Dynasty and Tang and the Song period. That is that change had, but they insist that two aspects. One is an economic growth that supported the political change, and the other one is an emergence of the more rational and more restructured form of the civil bureaucracy. That is known by the enforcement of the examination system, and or that helps the emergence of high mobility and the promotion system and the audit system. So, and of course, and this new type of the bureaucracy strengthens the centralized power of the emperor, and so such a new type of the civil bureaucracy continued down to the end of the Qin dynasty, and when the Naito was writing these topics at the Kyoto University, he also experienced a very great change in China, the collapse of the Qin dynasty and then emergence of the Republican policy. So the notion of the Tan-Song transition contains two aspects. One is the emergence of the new type of civil bureaucracy just continued up to the end of the Qin dynasty. And another one is that unprecedented growth in economy, commerce, urbanization, and productivity, and of course the increase in the population. That's a Japanese idea of Tan-Song transition. This idea was introduced by perhaps in 1960s by Edwin Reischauer of Harvard University.
Edward Reischauer.
Yeah, and then the Westerners became much familiar with this kind of ideas.
I see. So the Konen and Miyazaki, this is sometimes called the Konen-Miyazaki school or tradition.
Yeah, the same tradition, yes.
Yes, they initially discovered that this medieval China was not the same as its previous period, and its two main strands of influence were that the civil bureaucracy was changed to, as I understand it, the aristocratic grip on the government was broke, and positions in the civil bureaucracy became based on the civil examination.
That's right. Yeah.
And also that there was economic growth, per capita income increases and population increases.
Yes.
How has the mainstream view of Song China changed in Japan among non-Marxists as a result of this Kyoto School debate, this emergence of these new ideas in Kyoto?
I think then it was around middle of the 1918 and 1990s. There's a kind of compromise reached that between the Marxist group and the Kyoto group, non-Marxist Kyoto group.
In the 1980s and 1990s?
Yes, yeah. And led by the Utsunomiya Kiyoshi, and several books are published about that. And then the point of compromise is that the non-Marxist historians continue to use the term
Marxism.
modern, early modern.
Yes.
Yeah, term early modern periodization. And the Marxist side, for the Marxist side, they refrain from using the mechanical use of the
Strict Marxist.
Marxian hypothesis of stage by stage evolution.
I see.
And that is a major point of the controversy before the 1980, right?
I see. So the two extreme factions were the strong supporters of the Kyoto School and Marxists in Japan, and you say this compromise came about. Was this compromise driven mainly by Marxists at the University of Kyoto?
Yeah, that was a discussion among the Marxists, pro-Marxist scholars in Kyoto University.
I see.
Mostly, yes.
And so the compromise came from the Marxists at Kyoto University.
That's right, yeah.
I see. Yeah. And the upshot was that the strict interpretation of the Marxian stage theory was not to be so strictly applied to China's case.
That's right.
It would be a bit more practical. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay. Finally, a simple question that economists in the West are quite interested in is based on all the quantitative and qualitative evidence, do you believe that there was economic growth in Song China where both incomes and populations saw unprecedented and considerable increases?
Yeah, yeah. I think the economic growth was some measured by population growth or then some kind of agrarian revolution, improvement in techniques.
Yes.
And coming and influence of the commerce and urbanization, or major understanding of the economic historians in Japan.
In Japan, this is the general view,
Yeah,
at least among non-Marxists.
yeah. But the problem is that trend towards parochial, increasing concern about the parochial themes in the Chinese history. It is occurred at the time after the compromise was reached that, because people, the readers of mid-range, how to say, mid-range theories or theoretical interpreters emerged after that. Instead, the specialists who equipped with a broader and extensive view became very hard to emerge.
I see.
Yeah.
So some of this is a bit like Germany or some other European countries, at least in the recent past, where this parochial system emerged, where there's a single professor and many professors below him who their research was tied to this. And so this happened in Japan.
This is happening. Yeah.
After this compromise.
After the compromise.
I see.
Yeah.
And so people with a broader point of view had a more difficult time in having their views expressed.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I see. So next, what are the what in general today? Not in the 1980s or the 1990s, but today, what are the views among Song China experts in Japan regarding the economic performance of Song China? Today's experts in Song China.
Mainland China? No?
No, Japan.
In Japan.
Japan. What are the Japanese Song China experts today?
Yeah.
Do they generally view the Song China as having experienced economic growth?
Yeah, there is a growing number of the scholars of Chinese history who are advocating the Tanson tradition as a big watershed.
Yes.
In the China's economic growth. So,
I see.
Yeah.
So this big watershed was quite a break.
Yeah,
from the past, where
yes.
population and incomes perhaps were roughly constant or growing very slowly, but in the Song China, these, or at least from the as you say, the Tang Song transition. So since after the rebellion, up including the Song accelerating in the Song, this was a major break in Chinese long-run economic performance.
That's right.
I see. I'd like to shift gears now and talk about one of the most influential books in this field, a book that Professor Yoshinobu Shiba wrote in 1968. It was written and published in Japanese. It was partially translated by Mark Elvin in English under the title of Commerce and Society in Song China. Can you please tell me how your book in 1968 was initially received in Japan and elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, when I published the book in 1968, the time was in the heyday of the Marxian debate over the development stage, stage by stage development of the universal economy. So and Marxists are preoccupied by to appreciate didn't appreciate the growth or emergence of the commercial.
As I understand it, the Marxists pretty much generally reject the notion of the role of markets or commerce in social change.
That's right. Yeah.
So they simply will not discuss it or just reject it without any discussion.
Yeah, that's right.
I see.
But it was after the 1980s that people gradually appreciate
The role of commerce.
role of commerce. Yes.
I see. And is the Marxist tradition today, with new and young scholars and currently, at least the rigid version, is that still prominent or notable, or is that largely disappeared in Japan?
Notable.
The very rigid Marxist view, does that still exist today in Japan?
Yeah, some still. Yeah.
Some still have this view.
It's still sticking on the periodization.
But the majority of Japanese scholars are non-Marxist.
Non-Marxist.
And view Song China as a period of economic growth.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, what are you and other Song Dynasty experts researching today? What topics are popular and interesting today for the current research and young scholars today in Japan?
Yeah. After the introduction of the French annals or the social history inquiry by Brodel and others in the 1970s, Japanese tend to pay much attention to the social history, reproduction of social history. For example, the most favorite topic among the younger Japanese generation was the legal procedure.
Legal procedures.
At the lowest level of the society.
I see. Yeah. So local legal issues.
Yeah. It reveals an interaction between the written law and the unwritten law, customs or the norms of the people.
That's a very interesting and difficult field to come up, make the link or the distinction between formal and informal rules.
Yeah, but fortunately, the evidences are rather richly preserved.
I see. I have a colleague of mine who's at Academia Sinica in the History and Philology Institute, Liu Liyan, who's from
excellent.
Princeton University, and he's expert on Song Dynasty legal tradition.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Is he part of it? He's considered part of this.
I pay respect to him.
He's very interested in women's rights during the Song Dynasty.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a little bit about what different rights women had during the Song Dynasty that they did not have before?
It was in the legal documents of the Southern Song. There is some evidence of the women had an right to inherit property from their parents. But this custom didn't develop into the mainland China.
I see.
So it may be that this special case related to the reclamation of Jiangxi or the middle part of China, and belongs to a rather special case.
As I understand it, from my discussions with Liu Liyan, it's only based on about a handful of cases from the late Northern Song and early Song. Yet many scholars view this as the imperial government reacting to local customs that it actually began at a wider level at the lower levels of society and the lower levels of government, and eventually was adopted by the central government, and also that the right of inheritance. There seems to be some debate, although from my understanding and discussions with the LD is that the debates are about the name. Is it an inheritance, or is it part of a money distribution? But independent of that, women gained wealth from their parents when their parents died, and this was something very unique to the Song dynasty. It didn't exist before, and it didn't persist into the Ming-Qing period. Is that correct?
And there is another example that's a woman's right for the dowry.
For the dowry, yes.
Much larger in the Song.
Yes.
And compared with the Ming-Qing. I don't know the exact reason for that, but anyway, the women's rights that were the characters in the Song was reduced during the Ming and Qing.
I see. Yeah. So it seems that women had more, in some sense, more economic rights in the Song dynasty.
I guess so. Yeah. I probably so.
I think the evidence is 1,000-year-old and shaky, but it seems to suggest that, and that's very interesting.
Very interesting topic.
During economic change, that women would have more rights economically during that period. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, and I wish to thank you very much for having us interview you. Again, this is ChineseEconomicHistory.com's inaugural interview with Professor Yoshinobu Shiba. He's one of the world's experts on Chinese economic history and Song China in general. And we thank him very much for his time, and hope you enjoy your time at the World Economic History Congress here at Kyoto. And I might add, it's quite ironic that the Kyoto School won the debate, and now the first time the World Economic History Congress, we come to Kyoto.
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I would just simply like to ask Professor Shiba, how did you become interested in Song China economic history?
It was in my time of the high school. My teacher was a very famous specialist medieval economic history, wisdom, and he gave me a very interesting lecture on the daily life of the changes in daily life of the medieval people.
Chinese medieval day life?
Huh?
I'm sorry, the Chinese medieval day life?
No, German. German history.
I see.
So, and after I entered in the Tokyo University, I tried to professors of the Kyoto University. One, Naito Torajiro, and
also known as Naito Konan.
Naito Konan, and later, and Miyazaki Ichisada proposed an idea of the big social and economic change took place in the Song during the later half of the Tang Dynasty and Tang and the Song period. That is that change had. But they insist that two aspects. One is an economic growth.
We're extremely pleased to have our inaugural interview with Professor Yoshinobu Shiba. Yoshinobu Shiba is one of, if arguably not the best, well-known Song China economic historian. His contributions on this are very deep and immense, and his influence has been quite great. He is currently the executive librarian of Toyo Bunko, which I had the pleasure of visiting in November of 2013. He's also a member of the Japanese Academy, and he is Professor Emeritus of Osaka University. So first of all, hello, I am Ron Edwards with ChineseEconomicHistory.com, and we're here today at Kyoto's World Economic History Congress. This is the first time that the World Economic History Congress is being held in the Far East, and
study the same topics in China. Medieval China's change.
I see. So many economists in the West do not know that the discovery of the difference of Song China compared to its previous imperial periods was quite different, and that was a Japanese discovery. Could you please briefly explain the Japanese discovery of the Tang-Song transition, which Western economists would call Song China economic growth, and its impact?
It was in early 20th century that two